Good morning. Good morning. Hey, you can do it. What a fantastic conference. I go to a lot of conferences, and it's really rare for me to get to a conference where I actually have the problem of trying to select which particular talk I'm going to go to. I was totally enthralled yesterday. These guys do a really great job of curating a conference. So I just wanted to thank them for doing that, because that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you. I also wanted to thank them for putting up with me, because I'm one of these people that gives agile talks, by which I mean I don't actually know 2 or 3 days out exactly what I'm going to talk about. And that's been kind of driving people a little bit insane. I actually got banned from a corporate gig because they wanted my script. And I looked at them and said, I have no idea what my script is going to be. And so they said, well, we can't have you here unless you can tell us exactly what you're going to say. So this will be a bit random. I apologize, for causing grief to the people here when they wanted to find out what I was going to talk about. And in fact, they said, give us a title for the talk. And I said, well, it'll be about emerging somehow. And they said, give us a title. So I said, oh, Emerge-ncy. And they went with it. What I've actually decided to talk about is almost that. It's got Emerge in the title. I wanted to talk about how I see emergence working. And I'm going to start off by drawing on a favorite source of quotes, Alfred Lord Knight Whitehead, who says, all new ideas have a certain aspect of foolishness when they are first produced. And that's true. And a lot of the stuff that we are using today was stupid 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Who would have imagined we would be using a language as strange and Mickey Mouse as JavaScript when it first came out, 15, 20 years ago. And now it's probably one of the predominant programming languages. Same thing for dynamic languages versus statically compiled languages. Same things for typing. All of these kinds of ideas, which initially come out as being really kind of, foolish, turn out not to be. But at the same time, emergence has its challenges. Because as developers, we are working in possibly one of the most dynamic industries there has ever been. When you think about it, most professionals will get their training, and then they'll probably get it updated as they go along, but it won't be like the entire industry changes. Right? If you're a doctor, the human body now is roughly the same as the human body was when you trained. Yes, there'll be new tools, new drugs, new techniques, but this will be an incremental change. With us, the whole world is changing out underneath us, and that gives us certain challenges. I want to talk about a project that I started for myself. It was like a little home project. I started back at the end of November. And it's a diagramming tool, which is a bit, have anybody used the PIC language in Documenter's Workbench? It's a constraint-based drawing package, and I wanted to do something similar inside the browser. So I started off writing JavaScript, and I got kind of like a bit, so then I switched across to using CoffeeScript. And that was fun, because I like CoffeeScript. It's kind of like a little bit Ruby-like. And so I coded away for a couple of weeks in CoffeeScript. And then twice in one day, I got bitten by the parameter list that goes over a line, becomes 2 parameters, not 1, blah. And I got, screw this. So I thought, let's go ES6. Or sorry, ES 2015, as we're supposed to call it now. So I went to ES6 and Babel, blown away by how good the tools were. Very good. So then I had to do my package management side of things. And I started off with Bower, because that's what I was familiar with. But then really the tooling that I was using around ES6 doesn't really work with Bower, so I had to switch across to using NPN, which is good, fine, fair enough, not a problem. What am I going to use as my build tool? Well, I'm old school, so I started off using Grunt. But I bumped into a couple of little ugly things, and all of the online stuff was suggesting that Gulp was the way to go. So, of course, after a few weeks, I had to switch from Grunt to Gulp. And that was fine. That worked well. except I wasn't really generating stuff the way I wanted to. And someone said, oh, you need Browserify. So sure enough, I went and started using Browserify. And that was wonderful. It was building all these JavaScript for me, just what I wanted to do. Absolutely fantastic. But it really didn't give me the kind of surrounding stuff that I needed, clean and test targets and this kind of stuff. So then, oh no, actually before that, I actually had to bring Bower back because there were two libraries I needed that weren't in NPM. So I had to bring Bower back into the equation. And then I went to Gulp plus Browserify because after all, you do need some kind of automation. But that was such a pain to do. I then switched to using npm run plus Browserify. And that's where I got to about a week ago. No, not even then. That was probably this weekend. Right? So if from November until, what is it, that's 4 months, 3 months, I'd gone through a whole range of technologies. Had I finished my project? Hell no. But just to prove that there is, I'm flexible. Saturday night before coming here, I threw it all away and switched over to using Webpack. So I'm sure by the end of the week, I'll be using Make, But it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And this is the JavaScript community, but I know that the same is true in every community. We are awash in tools, and every single tool is the one that's going to save us. Every single tool is the new, bright, shiny thing that we have to use. But during this last 4 months, that's not how I felt. I haven't felt that I'm on this wonderful path to nirvana using all these great, shiny tools. Instead, I felt a little bit like this lady. There was an old lady who swallowed a fly, right? And to get rid of the fly, she swallowed a spider. And then she kept swallowing until she got to I guess it was a horse that finally killed her. I know exactly how she feels. And I'm sure you guys do too. It's a pain in the butt. The question really is, why do we put ourselves through this? What's going on that makes us do this? And there's a number of reasons. But I think the biggest reason, the one that I certainly identify with strongest, is fear. I think we all have fear of the unknown. I mean, to some extent, we're titillated by it, we enjoy it, but at the same time, there's fear of the unknown, fear of committing, fear of actually putting something down and saying, yeah, this is my stake in the ground, this is how it's going to be. Fear of failure, obviously. When I switched tools, a lot of it was because, I'm not really getting this one, so maybe I'll get the next one. So fear is a really strong driver. And what is the thing that really is our fundamental fear in this industry? Well, I think the roots of it come from a quote in The Mythical Man Month, one of my favorite books. And Fred Brooks said this, I don't know, what was it, mid-70s? He said, the programmer, like the poet, works only slightly removed from pure thought stuff. He builds his castles in the air, creating by exertion of the imagination. Few media of creation are so flexible, so easy to polish and rework, so readily capable of realizing grand conceptual structures. And that's true. We are blessed that we are working in this area where we can basically sit down at a blank screen and create something purely out of our imaginations. Isn't that amazing? But that does lead to what I think is the biggest fear that we have. It's the fear of the blank page. You're sitting there, and you're going to write the next great American novel. Yeah? This is it. You've been putting it off for years and years, and now you're going to do it. So you go up to the attic, and you drag out the old Smith & Corona typewriter, because that's obviously authentic, and that's what you want to be. You want to write an authentic novel. You're going to write it with a manual typewriter. So you go out, and you buy yourself a ream of paper, and you set yourself up with your typewriter and your ream of paper, and you look at it. And you look at it. And maybe you start to type, but pretty quickly you pull the paper out and you wad it up and you throw it into the pile, and you start again, and you look at it, and you look at it. You keep wanting to start, but every time you do start, it's like, no, that's not right, that's not what I want. And you take it out and you throw it away. And after maybe a week of this, you say to yourself, you know what? This is a manual typewriter idea. That was really stupid, because I'm afraid of making mistakes. It's so hard to go back and change them. Right? I think what I really need is a big, shiny new computer. So you go down to Best Buy and you buy yourself a good 27-inch iMac, and you load it all up, and it's the first time you use the Mac, but you know that artistic types use Macs, so therefore that's what you have to use. And so you go out and you get your Mac, and okay, you have to learn how to use it, so that takes a few days just to get the thing up and running. And then you've got to use this Pages thing, and that's kind of a bit strange, but eventually you get used to it. And so you think, now, a week, 2 weeks in, now I'm about ready to start the great American novel. And you sit there, and the cursor is blinking at you, and the keyboard is laughing at you, because you still cannot think what you're going to type. Sure, it's easier. You don't have to crumple the paper up anymore, but you still have to sort of sit there and think, I don't really get this. And so you spend a week staring at this expensive new computer, not being able to produce anything, and then suddenly you realize what's wrong. Writing, it's not a thing you can do in isolation. You have to be in a social environment to write. You have to have people around you if you want to be authentic. You have to be grounded with the common man. So you go back down to Best Buy, and you buy yourself a MacBook Air, because after all, that's what all the cool kids have, and you set up a life of Starbucks. Because you're going to sit in Starbucks, and you're going to write the great American novel. A week later, you are shaking like a leaf, but you still haven't really started. But as you lie in bed at night, you start thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I'm going to put my great American novel, my years and years worth of really hard-earned writing, onto a portable computer like this, and I might lose it. I might lose it. What do I do? So you go online the next day, and you work out that, what I need to do is to have some kind of backup. So you go back down to Best Buy, and you buy yourself a nice little RAID array, because that means if you write a lot, you'll have a whole bunch of space to put it on. That's absolutely fantastic. But, you're still stuck, right? You look at the RAID array, and it does not inspire you. What are you going to do? So again, you sit at night and you think about this, and you honestly realize, I know why I've been blocked. I've been blocked because I won't be able to create a physical version of what I write. And my brain is telling me that I need to be able to hold this. There's a fundamental need to touch what I produce. So the next morning, you go down, and they recognize you by now in Best Buy, and you buy yourself a really nice color printer. So this way, you'll be able to produce your novel, and everything will be fine. A week later, you still really haven't produced anything. You've typed a lot, but you've deleted it because it hasn't been right. So you go online again, and you say, what can help me with this? How can I break this logjam? And you realize that what you're really missing is software. There's software that helps you develop characters. There's software that helps you develop dialogues. There's software that helps you with plotting. There's software that helps you remove distractions on your screen while you're typing. There is software for everything. So you go out and you buy all of it. And that's great, because for the next month, you don't have to worry about writing. You're just going to worry about how to run all of this software and get it to work together and stop crashing and all this kind of stuff. But still, at the end of that month, you have not produced anything. And you realize the thing you're missing is a space where you can feel safe to write your own stuff. And so you go and you convert the attic. And 6 months later, you have this wonderful writer's attic in which you can sit and work, and everything is perfect. What more could you want? And you spend days sitting at that desk, your computer in front of you, still not being able to produce. And you realize that now the reason is, when I look out of that window, all I see is the house across the street. That's not very inspiring. Right? I'm a great writer. I need to be inspired. I need something grand. So the next day, I put my house on the market, and I go and get the ultimate Lakeview cottage, where I can sit and write the novel. Unfortunately, that cottage doesn't have power. It's out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm back to using my manual typewriter. Does that ring any bells? Certainly did with me, because that's how I feel when I'm writing. And it goes through that kind of experience that I went through over the last 3-4 months. But here's the reality. I mean, clearly, tools do not make the writer. No one has ever written a better novel because they had a faster computer, or a better spell checker, or some outlining software. Yeah, that helps, but it only helps if you're already a writer. And, if you're not, the tools are not going to help you. The reality is that if you're a writer, the writer is already there, already inside you somehow. It's like this idea of, how do you make a statue? Well, you cut away everything that's not a statue. How do you make a writer? Well, you cut away everything that's not the writer, and there, what's left is that writer. So if you are a writer, then the writer is in there, just waiting to emerge. So what I want to talk about today is, how do you make, or how do you help that inner writer emerge? How do you get emergence in yourself? And I think it all comes down, not all comes down, I think a lot of it comes down to the idea of tacit knowledge. Tacit is one of my favorite words, just because it sounds so nice, tacit. Right? Tacit is kind of like inherent, intrinsic, stuff that you know without knowing why or how you know it. It's kind of built into you somehow. Right? So tacit knowledge, I think, is one of the keys to emergence. And to talk about it, I want to talk about two very clever people. Right? In the old days, I'd used to put pictures up on slides, and there'd be pictures of people like Alan Kay or something, and I'd say, do you know who this person is? And, well, now I'm getting to more obscure people. I don't even bother to try anymore. So this guy is Bill Phillips. I got to read you, it's going to be slightly boring. I want to read you the first couple of paragraphs of his biography off Wikipedia, just because. Phillips was born in New Zealand to Harold Housego Phillips, a dairy farmer, and his wife, Edith Webber, a school teacher and postmistress. He left New Zealand before finishing school to work in Australia at a variety of jobs, including crocodile hunter and cinema manager. Two obviously go together. In 1937, Phillips headed to China, but had to escape to Russia when Japan invaded. He traveled across Russia on the Trans-Siberia Railway and made his way to Britain in 1938, where he studied electrical engineering. At the outbreak of World War II, Phillips joined the Royal Air Force and was sent to Singapore. When Singapore fell, he escaped on the troop ship, the Empire State, which came under attack before safely arriving in Java. When Java too was overrun, Phillips was captured by the Japanese and spent 3.5 years interned at a prisoner of war camp in the Dutch East Indies. During this period, he learned Chinese from the other prisoners, repaired and miniaturized a secret radio, and fashioned a secret water boiler for tea, which he had hooked into the camp lighting system. Okay, so this is what? He is, I'm not too sure, maybe mid-late 20s. And we've gone from being a crocodile hunter in Australia to being a prisoner of war, and then he gets made a member of the Order of the British Empire for his war service. He goes back to London when he gets out of the prisoner of war camp, and he was interested to see how people in that prisoner of war camp organized themselves. It was a kind of society that self-organized simply because of the constraints that were on him. And he wanted to see more about that. So he enrolled at the LSE to study sociology. And he got pretty bored pretty quickly. He decided that sociology wasn't really his thing. So he started attending economics lectures and got really interested in the ideas of economics. And that's where he has made his name. If you've done any economics, you've probably come across the Phillips curve, which is slightly controversial, but it talks about the relationship between unemployment and inflation. And that's kind of like, you know, his big name. But he actually got into economics in a big way with something else. You've probably heard the expression, money flows like water, okay? Well, to Phillips, water flows like money. Because he used his great engineering abilities that he learned both as a child and also in the services when he was an engineer to build something he called the moniac, right? This was back in the 50s, late 40s, 50s. We had the ENIAC and the Brainiac, all these computers. So he called his thing the moniac because it was an analog computer that modeled a country's money supply. Right? The actual field, because it had to have a name, was hydraulic macroeconomics. So he did this on his own time. He built it in his garage, literally. And then at the LSE, they have these times where people present to their peers. So he wheeled this thing in, and everyone was like laughing. What's this incredible, stupid contraption sitting in front of us? And he turned it on, and it started working. And up at the top here, it's hard to see on the picture, up at the top here is a piece of paper, and then there is an arm with a pen on it. And that pen is attached to a float in that tank. And as the paper goes by, the pen goes up and down, depending on the level of water in that tank. And it draws a graph. And that tank represents, I believe, the money supply. And so he could actually model the money supply using this machine. And people were absolutely blown away by this. The machine was fundamentally just valves, pumps, and some tanks. And each tank corresponded to a place where money can sit, and the valves allowed you to control the rate at which it moves out of there, and the pipes allowed you to, or the pumps allowed you to circulate it back around again. So by doing this, he was actually solving 9 simultaneous differential equations, which is something that couldn't have been done manually. And to everybody's amazement, his little machine was accurate to 2%. Now, I'm not 100% sure exactly what that means, but people say it was more accurate than any other means of calculating it back at that time. They built half a dozen of these things. There's one in New Zealand in the National Bank there. There's one in the Science Museum in London. There are a few, I think LSE has one still. There's actually one that still works, and once a year they crank it up, fill it up with water, and give a demonstration to the public. So we have this incredible Baroque machine that produces graphs that are accurate to 2%. And here's the cool thing. No one can really say why it produces the output it produces. I mean, yeah, you understand the equations behind it, but it produces output that you can't really justify, in a hard sense. interestingly, it often produces different output given the same inputs. That's the nature of a sensitive system of equations. And if it produces an unexpected answer, you have no idea whether or not it's wrong or whether it's just come up with something which is so staggering that you wouldn't have believed it. Does this sound familiar? Experts work the same way. There's a study, not a study, there's a theory, I guess, by the Dreyfus brothers. If you heard me talk before, I often talk about the Dreyfus brothers. But they talk about how people learn, how people acquire expertise. And they say that everybody passes through a number of stages from novice to expert. And the key fact of being an expert is that your knowledge has become tacit. It's become internal. And when you're an expert, you make decisions not based on a thorough analysis of all the facts. You make decisions based on a gut feeling, on intuition. And you're doing that because in your head, you actually have a whole bunch of connections. And they're all firing off and firing other ones off, just like that water machine, right? You think one thing and then something else goes, well, but that was like this and this was like, and eventually you speak. And you have no idea quite where the speech comes from, but it's intuition. It's tacit knowledge. And experts are right more often than they're not. But if you ask them why, they really can't tell you. Now, in our industry, experts have learned that if you say, I don't know, you don't get another gig. So experts have learned to write long, long papers on why they believe it's what the way it should be. But the reality is those are just excuses. Those are just things they make up, having already got to their opinion. So experts, just like the Moniac, don't know why they've done what they've done. But they have spent their life preparing. So they have that intuition. Second person I want to talk about is this man, Michael Polanyi. He is wickedly smart. I mean, scarily smart. He was a chemist, sociologist, economist, and a philosopher. And he has written some really fantastic books. The one that I want to draw on is called The Tacit Dimension, published in the mid-60s. And the underlying premise of that is, as human beings, we know more than we can explain. We know more than we can tell. And he doesn't mean this in a mystical sense. He just means that you cannot possibly describe all the stuff that you know. Because there's actually, you need something left behind in order to be able to describe the rest, right? You cannot know everything that you know. If you did, then you would never be able to think of anything new. So he says it's really important that you have to learn to trust this tacit dimension. Now, how do you develop this tacit dimension? Well, back in the 60s and 70s, psychology was a really fun profession. And it was fun because you get to torture people, right? And now it's all soft and wimpy, and there's rules of ethics and stuff like that. You're not allowed to do that. But back then, you could do some really cool stuff. And so they did a whole bunch of experiments to do with how people acquire this tacit knowledge. And most of the experiments work the same kind of way. You would have a bunch of stimuli, and you would have some kind of external effect. And obviously, they would both be perceived by the subject. So in one of the first experiments, the stimuli were somebody reading a list of words. Right? And the list would repeat, not in the same order, but the words would repeat in the list, I guess is what I'm saying. And they would read these words out. And every now and then, the subject would get an electric shock. That's the sensed effect. All right? See what I mean about being able to torture people? So you'd be reading these words, and then a shock would come. What people didn't know is that the shock actually came before one or two different words. No, sorry, after one or two of those words. And the pattern wasn't obvious. It wasn't easy to sense. But that was what's actually happening. And what happens inside your brain is interesting. Your brain, the entire point of it is to make all of these associations. Right? It's a one big associative memory that looks for coincidences and tries to build patterns out of them. And that is going on all the time, and it's going on without you being aware of it. So what would happen in these victims is that their brains would be noticing, without them realizing it, that certain words preceded the shock. And they would build up this tacit knowledge of the stimuli. So the cool thing was that the subjects, after a while, would start to flinch before the shock came when certain words were said. If you asked them, they would tell you, this was totally, I was just getting random shocks. I have no idea what was going on. But inside their heads, they'd built this pattern. And they'd noticed that that word caused a shock. And therefore, they're going to recoil even before the shock arrives. And they had no knowledge of it happening, which is kind of cool. Yeah? A similar thing happens when we recognize people. I mean, think about it. How do you recognize a friend? Can you describe the process you go through? If you're walking down the hall and you say, hi, Sue. How does that happen? You cannot describe it. But we recognize something. Maybe it's a gesture. Maybe it's, the way they hold their hand. I don't know. There's lots of different things for different people. And we build that up simply because we see them enough, and our brain is going to make that connection. When I see someone who holds his head that way, then it's probably whoever. So tacit knowledge is really, really powerful knowledge. In fact, there are some senses in which it is the only real knowledge. Because it's the integration of all of our experience. Right? Our brain is, over a lifetime, building up all of these connections and using those to build up this tacit knowledge. We don't think about doing that. It's totally beneath the surface. But that's what we have. And we use it without thinking. And the cool thing about tacit knowledge is that it's cumulative. Now, I don't know if this is true, but it seems reasonable to me. When you're learning a new language, like my wife's learning Chinese. I tried, but my brain is not up to it. But my wife is learning Chinese. And initially, it's hard to even understand the sounds, to break things apart into individual sounds. And you listen to enough of it. I mean, we subscribe to CCTV, and we have Chinese going on all the time in the house. And basically, after a while of just being immersed in it, you start being able to hear it. And so you can actually pick up the sounds, and then following on from then, you can sort of like say, that patterns of these sounds, combinations of these sounds make certain words. And after a while, you start to be able to hear words as their meaning, without having to sit there and think, that sound, that means this, right? Instead, it becomes tacit. The pattern has been established, and you can hear it. But it doesn't stop there, because then you start learning phrases, and you start being able to understand an entire phrase. And in fact, you get confused if someone starts a phrase, and you think you know how it's going to end, and they say something different. Right? That's actually probably the basis of many jokes, right? That confusion that you raise in people. So you have this kind of cumulative effect. The more tacit knowledge you build, the more you can build on top of it. Right? You're not going to learn to be able to write the great Chinese novel until you've learned Chinese sounds, Chinese words, Chinese phrases. When you use tacit knowledge, you don't know that you're using it, right? You don't know the lower levels are there. They become transparent to you. They're underneath the water level, okay? And in fact, they've done lots of experiments to show that you actually become not very effective if you start thinking about the lower levels. Right? If you start trying to be conscious about those lower levels, then you actually lose the ability to perform effectively at a higher level. You could try this. And there's some things we do every day that you just don't realize are building on this incredible amount of knowledge. Think about babies learning to walk. Right? The first things they're going to do, actually it's really funny, if you watch babies playing, so much of their play is to do with just working out what happens when they do things. Right? Their arm's going to move back and forth, back and forth. Oh, and eventually they learn, oh, you know, this is what my arm moving is like, and I can now do this consciously. Right? But try and think about it. As you walk, try and actually make yourself walk. Right? Try and think about, okay, leg, now you lift up, I want you to go forward, whatever else, right? Do this on a soft thing, because if you really honestly do it, you will fall over. Because walking is actually a whole sequence of making yourself off balance and then correcting yourself again. And if you try and think about that, you're just going to fall over. Another thing to do is actually think about it when you speak. Think about the syllables you form. Think about the way your mouth moves. Think about your tongue position. Think about, you know, the various, you know, breathing that you have to do. And concentrate on that as you talk and see how fluently you can talk. And, you know, think about it in terms of coding too. Right? You have tacit knowledge about things like, well, variables or execution or recursion or whatever it might be. You have all of this tacit knowledge about programming. I want you to forget about that and actually think about exactly what is going on with every single character that you type the next time you type something, and see how productive you become doing that. People are not productive if you remove the tacit dimension. And the tacit dimension is a substrate on which you build the next level of tacit dimension. You're constantly adding and refining and building on top of your past experience. So like I say, the writer is already there, just waiting to emerge. And I strongly believe that tacit knowledge fuels emergence. Okay? You cannot just, you know, turn into a butterfly without going through the steps involved, which fundamentally means dissolving your body down into a bit of goop and then coming back out again. But, you know, it's not a perfect simile. But yet you have to have that tacit knowledge. Remember there's an old saying, something like, what is it? Fortune favors the prepared mind, or something like that. Right? The idea is that, yeah, okay, some people can just walk up and solve a problem. But they can do that because they have the years of experience behind them to know which pipe to hit or which line of code to change. Coming back to my friend, Alfred North Whitehead, civilization advances by extending the number of important operations which we can perform without thinking about them. When you're scrabbling day to day just for the basics of survival, then you are not going to have the time to write great literature, paint great paintings, design new engineering marvels, because all of your energy, all of your thinking is to do with keeping alive. You have to develop levels of abstraction. You have to develop levels of confidence to do the next great thing. So tacit knowledge is incredibly important. And I believe strongly that you cannot have any kind of emergence without having a supporting platform of that tacit knowledge underneath you. So then the question is, how do you go about building tacit knowledge? Can I get a book on tacit knowledge and read it and then have it? Or is there maybe, actually even better, is there a YouTube series that I can sit and watch, you know? Or maybe like a podcast I can do while I'm, you know, walking to work or whatever. You know, how do I build tacit knowledge? And there's only one answer, right? The only way to build tacit knowledge is the hard way. And that hard way is experience. Right? The only way of developing that ability to know A from B is through experience. And it's not just any experience. It is planned and directed experience. It's thinking, how do I maximize the next day's worth of experience? Do I maximize that by doing the same thing again that I did yesterday? No, not really. I mean, yes, that repetition is going to help. But you've really constantly got to be thinking about, where do I want to get to? What kind of experience do I need in order to be able to do that? And then putting yourself into a situation where you are going to gain that experience. You also have to be prepared along the way to make lots of mistakes. And in fact, if you're not making mistakes, that's a really good indicator that you're not getting the right kind of experience. Because in fact, the learning happens not when you're doing it, but when you make mistakes and fix them. If I have one problem with most organizations, is that they view mistakes as being bad. Right? Mistakes are something that you really want to try and cover up and just patch over and, oh, it's all right, everything's fine, boss, everything's fine. Yeah. In reality, if you want to develop a great team of experienced and confident people, you have to celebrate mistakes. You have to allow mistakes out into the open. You have to talk about them. What did I learn from that? How am I going to fix that? Is it really a mistake? Maybe it's an opportunity in disguise. Right? So you have to learn to make mistakes. So let's try and bring this full circle. This is the Emerging Technologies for the Enterprise conference. And we come here because basically it's like coming to some market or bazaar where people are giving all these bright, shiny things away, right? You go in and you can see all these new cool technologies, all these wonderful, animated things on web pages and cool new ways of constructing code, cool new languages, cool new techniques, all of these things. And to some extent, people view this as a little bit like a shopping expedition. Right? I'm going to go to ETE and I'm going to come away with 3 new ideas that we're going to do tomorrow in our team. Right? And that way, we'll be at the leading edge. And I think that's exactly the wrong way to think about this conference. Right? I don't think you want to think about what you've seen here as new things that you could be doing. Because most of the people that have shown you things and said, this worked really great, what they really mean is, this really worked great for us, given our experience in our environment with our particular problems and with our management structure and da-da-da-da-da, right? It's contextual. So please, don't view this conference as being a place where you can pick up new ideas and just run with them. Instead, think of this conference as being a shopping list of all the new mistakes that you can make. Right? Think of this conference as leading to a colossal set of failures. And if it does that, then you will have been so greatly enriched by this experience. My kids used to love the Magic School Bus. And Miss Frizzle used to say, take chances, make mistakes, get messy. And I think that's actually possibly the best advice you can give to any child of any age. And we all forget that. We all think we have to be sophisticated and suave and whatever else, right? We're not allowed to make mistakes. We're not allowed to get messy. And we lose this ability to generate the tacit knowledge that comes from doing that. Because I think it's only by making mistakes, only by gaining experience, that you'll have a substrate on which the new stuff can happen. Because you have to be in control, right? It's not the typewriter or the word processor or whatever else that writes the book. It's the author. You have to be in control. And to do that, you have to have that testability. And then, once you have that, then you see emergence. Then you see all of the cool stuff coming about. So please, go away from here, try all of this new stuff, and make total and absolute fools of yourselves. Because that way you'll become great. Thank you very much. Question? We have time if people want to beat me up. Uh-oh. That's bad. Does anybody disagree? We have. Hang on, wait, we need microphones, apparently.
Not so much a disagreement as a caution. This is all great, as long as you're not making the same mistake.
Good point. That's a very good point. He says that it's important to make mistakes, but it's also equally important not to make the same mistake multiple times. And I agree. And in fact, implicit in what you just said there is the ability to recognize you're making a mistake. Yeah? One of the main benefits of doing things with a process is that you get that ability to have feedback. And the feedback is what tells you you're making mistakes. So the overall pattern that I always try to adopt is don't do something until I know what done means. All right? So don't do something, well, that's not quite true. Don't do something until I can test to see what I've done actually does something. Yeah? So, and that's not necessarily saying I'm an advocate of test-first development, because I'm not, but it actually means that I need to know what the feedback is going to be as I start something out. Yeah? And if I get surprised, then I have to say, okay, is this a mistake or is this a serendipitous discovery? Yeah? But you always have to have that feedback to do it, and that's the way of making sure you don't make the same mistake multiple times.
As I was listening to you, one of the things I noticed was how much this, I think, resonates not just with individuals, but with teams. That teams develop tacit knowledge. Some people call it co-intelligence that they can draw on and so on. And it's very much reflected in the Agile Fluency model that Jim Shore and I have put together. And so I just was wondering about your comment of taking this beyond the individual to larger groups.
Oh, absolutely. I think teams, an effective team has to have tacit knowledge. And it's actually kind of interesting. There's a really simple test I use as a consultant to see if the team has got that, and that is, do they have their own words for things? Do they have their own jargon? Because jargon, we all use jargon. Jargon is a way of giving shorthand for tacit experience, right? So I can say something in 2 words, but I can actually mean 3 weeks worth of experience with that, right? Husbands and wives have jargon. Quite often, husbands and wives can convey a whole paragraph just by looking at each other in a certain way, yeah? I know because I'm married. I mean, teams do the same thing. And teams have all of those little subtle cues. You watch a really good team in a meeting, and it's kind of like, what happened? You know, they get through the whole thing, and it's just like, whoa, because they have that tacit knowledge. So I agree 100%.
Could you elaborate on why you're not a fan of TDD? Because that's exactly what your talk made me think of.
I think that test-driven development initially was a really good idea. I also think that if you are an inexperienced developer, then the discipline of TDD teaches you a number of things. It teaches you the rhythm of programming. It teaches you to slow down and think. And I think that's an excellent starting point. What I'm against is the current religious nature of some of these practices. There are teams where, if you don't write a test before you write, class Fred, then, you're ostracized, you're put down, right? And I think any time a practice becomes dogma, then I run from it, right? Because dogma is just another way of thinking someone told me to do this, right? And I just don't like that. So I think that the concept of test-driven development is a great one. I think the concept of writing unit tests is a good one, but I don't think that it is as significant as it's become. In a way, the tail is wagging the dog in the industry right now. And I think it's about time we actually recognize what we're really doing is delivering value and finding contextual ways of making sure that happens. All right? And testing is not the universal answer to that. Can I have a security thing coming out the room, please, just because of that?
So tacit knowledge, it seems like it's almost an example of experience becoming intuition to the point where you don't even think about it anymore, and sometimes it's even hard to explain. I've had experience with people that don't necessarily have a lot of experience, but they seem to have very strong design instincts that if you can harness them, can really be great towards a problem, but sometimes they have trouble verbalizing. Sometimes they'll use the expression, I feel that, blah. And it's almost like a way of saying, I don't quite understand why, but I don't like this design, maybe because it's lacking symmetry, et cetera. How do you harness that without beating them up too much because they can't explain their ideas logically?
Oh, okay. Never, ever ask an expert to explain, right? That is... Not an expert. Oh, no, okay, but yes, they are. In a way they are, okay? So for example, I don't know anything, but I was listening to the radio going to the airport, and there was some report about I think she's 17-year-old golfer, is that right? Who is apparently like the world's best golfer at the moment, and she's 17, she has really not that much experience, but she's beating everybody else, right? There are child actors who are like phenomenally good actors. There are people who come to development late. They maybe went through college and did music or history or something else, and then they got into development, and my God, they are great developers, right? And not all tacit knowledge is learned at the same rate by the same people, right? It's always a mistake to treat people as an equal pool of things, right? So some people just have more aptitude for picking up certain things. So possibly your people have an aesthetic that, was in them initially, or maybe they developed it by, playing the piano or painting or whatever it was, but they learned the patterns, lowercase p, of nice bits of design. And they can't articulate exactly what makes something nice or not nice, but they can still recognize it, I don't know what good art is, but actually it's better as that pornography thing, right? Right? You don't know what it is, but I know when I see it kind of thing, right? Well, it's the same with art, with that design aesthetic. And that needs to be nurtured, right? The trick with nurturing it is not to let them get away with it too much, because otherwise they're going to start making stuff up, because this is an easy way out, yeah? So you have to give them that, you have to make sure there's feedback in that process. But yeah, don't say you've got to justify it. Never say, if someone says, I don't think, I think, I feel, I believe, then make note, see if they're right. Let them do it again, see if they're right. And if they keep being right, who cares why, right? Honor them for it. We should probably break. Oh, okay, last question then. No pressure.
I really get what you're saying about tacit knowledge, but you mentioned a problem that you kind of move on, which is your culture doesn't accept mistakes. None of this is work, right? So, do you have any experience in talking with folks on how to change culture? The value of what you're talking about.
Do I have any experience changing on how to change culture? Nothing reliable. No, I mean, ultimately, it's how willing is that culture to change? It has to be, right? And a company in trouble becomes a company that's entrenched, a company that's defensive, and a company where communication doesn't flow because you don't want to give bad news. In those environments, it's really, really hard to convince people to let go and to trust expertise. Right? Now, if you're not quite to that stage yet, then you can do it. And it's kind of like a variant of the answer to the other question, is I have seen people do it by effectively documenting the process. By saying, okay, this is what we said was going to happen. We didn't do it that way, but sorry, we thought we should do it this way, but we did it this way. This is what happened. That process, you can convince people. If you can do it diplomatically enough, you can convince people to let you try. I have seen one organization adopt agile practices in quite an interesting way. There was a team in that organization who had a bit of bench time. They'd finished one project. They had a month to wait before something else came along. And they were looking around for something to do. And they found an older project that was supposed to have taken a couple of months. 18 months in, it still was nowhere near complete. So they said to the management, hey, let us have a go at that. And they took over a conference room, and they went in there, and a month later, they delivered the finished project. And the management said, how did you do that? And they said, oh, it doesn't matter. And the management said, no, 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 you have to tell us how you did that. And they just said, oh, we were lucky. We were lucky. You know, give us another one. So they did the same thing again, all right? Not quite as dramatic, but they still did the same thing again. And the management basically insisted, you have to tell us how you did that. Well, we were using a variant of XP where we did this, this, and this, and this, and this, and we had these practices, and as a result, we could, all right? And the management said, oh, great, I want you to tell everybody in the organization what you did so they could do it. And they said, no. Because if we do that, it won't work. But instead what we'll do is we'll split our team into two, and you can bring 6 new people in on each of those teams, and we'll show them. And so over the course of a couple of years, they had this kind of like viral growth out from this small nucleus. And at the end of that time, their entire division was clocking things out like that small team did. Okay? That only worked because the management trusted them initially, you know? But I mean, that's a possibility. Anyway, if today is anything like yesterday, you're going to have a fantastic time. So enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.